Whilst everyone has been discussing some of the two most hyped characters in the game, Malvika and Citlali, both Lanyan and Pyro MC have gone mostly under the radar, as on the surface they aren't really that interesting. However, when looking into Lanyan for this video, she's actually surprised me with not only how good her defensive utility is, but she's also shaping up to be a very solid addition to the game's meta in general, which is what we're going to be discussing today. Greetings there, Flip here, and today we're going to be talking about Lanyan, the new 4-star coming in version 5.3, and going over and explaining her kit, how good she'll be in the meta, and then going over the best way to build her and how much of an upgrade she is to some teams. But before we do that, thank you to my channel members, I really do appreciate all of your support. And also, hi, Malvika and Citlali are around the corner, so if you'd like to save yourself some cash, then I'd like to announce the sponsor of today's video, Loot Bar. Loot Bar is a very safe and secure service I've been using for a few months now that some of you may be familiar with, as it allows you to buy Primo Gems at a 23% discount. And it doesn't need any passwords, just your UID and region. So if I just do this, and would you look at that, in only 3 minutes I've received my gems. I got the 3,280 Primo Gem pack at only £36.8, which saves me some money from the original price. This site has also been endorsed by other creators such as Juice, Dukaja, and of course yours truly. Loot Bar essentially will act as a gateway using a VPN to cut down on the cost of gems by removing certain taxes, whilst going through the official top-up methods for the game, which allows you to enjoy the benefits that you'd get in-game like the top-up bonuses. So use my link in the description below to get 8% off a new user coupon on your purchase. Thank you Loot Bar for sponsoring, and with that, let's get back to the video. Lanyan is a 4-star Anima Catalyst character who's pretty much just a shielder. I'm being so deadass, that is basically her entire kit. Her normal attacks don't really do anything, which is to be expected at this point, but at the very least she's an Anima character, so that means all of her attacks will be Anima infused, which will be important when talking about her teams. Now for her elemental skill, it has 2 stages. This little girl will run at you with her 2 ring blades, then do a parkour backflip on your body and create a shield. And while she's midair in this animation, if you press the elemental skill button again or use a normal attack, she will throw her rings at an opponent that will do damage on contact and continue spinning, and then they will do damage again. Now I know most of you are here to hear how good her shield is, but that'll have to wait for later after I cover the rest of her kit and constellations, as there's some missing info in the rest of her kit that puts into context how strong it can be. Something that doesn't help her shield, although is very useful, is going to be her elemental burst. It will do 3 instances of damage in an AoE, but what is actually important about this burst is the fact that it groups. And from the sparse gameplay shown by leakers, it actually looks to be pretty good grouping. It has a good suck, pause, and it seems to even throw enemies in the air somewhat. The closest comparison I can make is something like Kazuha's tap skill. No clue what the poise value looks like, that will have to wait for the livestream or in-game testing unfortunately, but it does seem very good, unlike something like Hazel or Lynette's, which don't feel that impactful. It is only once every 15 seconds and it needs 60 energy, but at the same time, if you look at Kazuha, he's only really grouping once per rotation in most of his teams, so this isn't the biggest deal in the world as long as that one instance of grouping is good. Moving on to Lanyan's Ascension passives. For her A1, if you make contact with an enemy during the dash portion of her skill, her shield will be converted to that elemental type, as well as get the bonus absorption for that corresponding element, and it also makes her rings deal an additional elemental hit on top of this. Then her next Ascension passive is whatever, it makes her deal more damage based on her elemental mastery. Moving on, as a 4-star, her constellations are basically just an extension of her base kit, so let's talk about them here too. Her C1 makes her throw an additional ring blade when you undergo conversion with her skill. This doesn't matter that much, but it's whatever. Her C2 is probably her most important constellation, and it makes it so that when you do normal attacks, 40% of her shield's absorption will be restored, and this can happen once every 2 seconds. So if an enemy brings your shields down to half and you do a normal attack in this window, your shield will now be back up to 90% of its absorption, which I don't think I really need to explain how insane that is. Basically every 2 seconds, as long as your shield isn't getting broken, it will be able to tank damage super effectively. And again, more on that after I cover her constellations. C3 will increase her skill talent, C4 gives 60 EM after using your burst. Please take a guess at what her C5 does, 99% of Genshin players get this wrong. And with her C6 you gain an additional skill charge. This can be nice for reducing energy requirements and can allow you to recast your shield earlier than you normally would. The only issue with this for a general play is that Lanyan already takes a lot of field time, especially for a 4-star, and this constellation can just make this worse on your first rotation. With that out of the way, let's break down her mechanics further. For starters, how strong is her shield? Adding back to the shield comparison I made a few weeks ago, you can see that at C6, Lanyan's shield pretty comfortably lands with the other strong 4-star shielders when she uses Favonius and 2 attack main stats, which is nice. But there are a few things that can make her shield a lot stronger than this. For one, her shield is attack scaling. Attack buffs in this game are extremely common. Shields don't snapshot unfortunately, but she does take advantage of buffs like Noblesse, Tenacity, Tenacity and Pyro Resonance, which is something HP scalers can't take advantage of as often. Another thing that can make her shield stronger than normal is going to be her C2, which, to refresh your memory, restores 40% of your shield's absorption when a normal attack is executed. You can't go above your regular shield HP with this, but as long as your shield doesn't break every 2 seconds, the effective HP you are able to get from this is absurd, as the shield will just keep regenerating. With just 2 C2 procs, this would already put her shield on the level of Zhongli, and any more procs makes her just outscale him in terms of theoretical shield HP. Additionally, she can also infuse elements other than her own, and for why that's important, the reason why Zhongli's shield is so much ahead of the other shielders is due to the fact that Geo shields innately have 150% more absorption to all elemental types, but in terms of his base shield HP, it isn't that much higher than the other shielders. The important thing to note is that Geo shield's absorptions are 150% stronger to all elemental types, whereas other elemental shields are 250% stronger against the matching element. So if you are in a situation where you're against enemies like Tulpa, or any enemy with an innate infusion, because Lanyan's shield will take on the elemental properties of the shield she absorbs, her shield will just far exceed Zhongli in these cases. So when Copelia puts up her cryo shield, great, just swirl and you will effectively be immortal. And the same happens to Tulpa. And if you have the right element on your team, it can happen for consecrated beasts that aren't Dendro. So in situations where you can guarantee that you can absorb the enemy's primary attacking type, or against enemies that aren't able to break her shield every 2 seconds, Lanyan just has the strongest shield in the game. And if she's able to both continuously proc her C2 and match the enemy's damaging type, you are literally immortal with her shield up. The only real downside is the fact that the shield lasts for 12.5 seconds, so in most teams you can't get this to have 100% uptime unless you do some weird rotations with her C6. So Now before going into her team options and how she fares in certain scenarios, let's do a quick build guide as she's relatively straightforward. Starting with the energy requirements, they do vary quite a lot depending on what you're doing with her. For triple Onoma teams and you're using her with Wanderer, you want to build around 140% energy. For solo Onoma teams, if she's on Favonius, then you want to build around 200% to 220% depending on how long the rotation is, and if other characters are using Favonius. And then on solo Onoma teams, if she isn't using Favonius, you're building around 250% to 270%. Her C6 can help with this on your first rotation, but after that you're on your own. If she is on field though, this can be lowered by quite a bit. Also, her burst can just be skipped in a lot of cases if you don't need the grouping, and it won't be that big of a deal. Her best artifact set when you're on a team that has a swirlable element will be 4 Viridescent. Otherwise, your best bet will be using the scroll set if there's no other holder on the team. For artifact main stats, you are either using an attack percent sans or ER sans. Her personal damage is honestly pretty okay if you want to build for it, especially on Wanderer teams, but I know most of you don't care about that, so just use an attack percent goblet. And then for your circler, you're either using crit if you care about her personal damage or using a Favonius weapon, and attack percent otherwise. And if you plan to use her as an on-field driver, just use her with triple EM. Maybe keep 1 attack percent substat so that your shield is still decently strong. Speaking of weapons for her, the best general recommendation would be Sitlali's signature, just giving 28% damage bonus to the active character after Lanyan generates a shield. And then for other weapons, TTDS is the reason why she can be so competitive on attack scaling teams. So if your main carry benefits from attack, you want to build this weapon with her. Otherwise, you lose a lot of damage to where she isn't that much better than other shielders. But if your carry doesn't use attack that well like Nuvolet, then just use Favonius. And if you plan to use her as an on-field taser driver, knock yourself out with the Hakushin ring. Moving on to her team, she can really just be a Kaza replacement pretty universally as she holds VV and has solid grouping. It would be so funny if the livestream tomorrow shows her grouping is up. But for teams I think she actually makes better, it would be for characters that need a shield or benefit a lot from them to stay uninterrupted. And for that I did calculate some scenarios. Starting with Wanderer, Lanyan is able to hold the scroll set and pass him a TTDS buff every rotation, while doing respectable damage of her own even on a shield focused build due to the fact that she's buffed by Farazan. Wanderer's other shielded options were Toma or Layla, who didn't provide that much for him, so Lanyan being able to hold the scroll set and do some respectable damage puts her ahead of the other options by a decent margin. The only issue though is that you can just use Furina or Yelan who have longer lasting buffs. Assuming you use Wanderer's burst at the start or end of your field time, TTDS won't be able to buff all of it, whereas Yelan and Furina comfortably can. And they're able to do this while doing more damage than Lanyan. So yes, Lanyan is the best shielded option for Wanderer, but characters like Yelan and Furina can push out more damage at the cost of some comfort. So if you're already fine with using Wanderer without a shield, then you don't really gain a benefit in switching. Sticking with the twinks, does Wanderer count as a twink? It's not important. I also wanted to look at Linny's personal damage benefits from Lanyan over his best shielder, which would have been Zhongli, and likewise Lanyan should just be better. She's able to provide VV and use Stealing Tails, which is more beneficial than Geo Resonance and whatever other buff Zhongli could provide. But what I found interesting is I got curious about how Sitlali would fare here, as she can hold the scroll set and enable at least 1 melt, in which with Thrilling Tails active, Sitlali is ahead of even Kazuha on this team with 1 melted charge on Linny, so Sitlali is technically the best shielder for Linny. The only issue with Thrilling Tails for the both of them is the fact that Linny plays 16-second long rotations on this team, so TTDS will still be on cooldown, meaning you get the buff once every other rotation, which is why I looked at a 2 rotation average for his damage. But yes, for this type of Lenny team, Lanyan is the second best shielded option to Sitlali, which is nice. Still unfortunately worse than using Furina though. The last character I looked at was Nuvula, in which it's not really that interesting. She is basically equal to an archaic Petra Zhongli, but is still worse than using Kazuha. People asked me about her prospects in a Chlor and Aggravate team and keeping Nahida for a team like this, because of the new event sword that gives you damage bonus and crit with its shield active. For one, Chlorant heals herself, you can get by just fine without a dedicated defensive option in my opinion. For two, Kirara exists, and running Kirara and Kazuha should just perform better than running Nahida and Lanyan, especially in multi-wave as Nahida can't reapply Dendra there. Lanyan as an alternative should just be good, but it's not really an upgrade at all. This is also the same case with using her as a driver for an EC team. She helps you free up Sucrose, but not really an upgrade. People were dooming replacing Beta with Auroron as you lose Beta's defensive utility, but with Lanyan she can cover that, so that's no longer a weakness of the team. All in all, as far as shielded options go, Lanyan is looking to be the best offensive shielder for a plethora of teams over Zhongli, all while being able to group. And like with how people have been using the Kazuha and Shilonin pairing, the Shilonin and Lanyan pairing also looks to be very nice on the surface, giving you interruption resistance as well as healing. And you still get the full benefits of both units, unlike using a double Onmo buffing team or something. I think it's kind of insane how Lanyan theoretically can be both a defensive and offensive upgrade to Zhongli. That is just very funny. And against some of the most annoying bosses in the game like Tulpa or Capelia, she seems to be the best defensive matchup you can have. The only current problem with Lanyan, despite all her merits, is the fact that she has the shield attacks, to where she isn't better than just sacrificing an offensive slot. So it isn't like Lanyan is out here defining the meta like with Sitlali, which I covered in my previous video, but it's still nice that some other shielded teams are getting a slight bump in damage. And with that, thank you guys so much for watching. If you enjoyed the video, make sure to like, subscribe, and comment your thoughts on Lanyan, as I'd love to hear it and respond to almost every single comment. Channel members, I love you and appreciate your support. Thanks again for watching, and I'll see you guys on the flip side. Peace.